So today we're going to be talking about the Kabbalah of human perfection. And we're going to talk about during the time that we find ourselves in, that this is one of the focusing points that our attention is geared to. Because during the period between Passover and Shavuos, which was when the Torah was given, we have a period of the Omer, which we're going to describe exactly what went into that, what's the history of it, what's the spirituality behind it, and how that relates back to perfecting our character traits. Sound like fun? All right. So, one of the things that's discussed throughout Jewish literature is that true freedom, if a person wants to achieve true spiritual freedom, that is achieved through occupying oneself with Torah. When a person occupies themselves with Torah, they achieve true freedom. The 7 weeks between Passover and Shavuos are our path to complete freedom that was started during Passover. Pesach, it's called the festival of our freedom, and that was like the catalyst, that was the galvanizing force that gives us the power to experience spiritual freedom year-round. But this period between Passover and Shavuos is a special additional time of making those ideas more tangible in ourselves. Okay? So Passover, Pesach, is about physical freedom, commemorating primarily physical freedom, our redemption from Egypt. But Shavuos is the culmination of our spiritual freedom. Okay? So one who lives a life that is predicated on Torah study, on Torah values, on Torah perspective, removes from their life the anguish of exile, death, and suffering. Question is, how can somebody who's subjected to all of the do's and don'ts of the Torah be considered liberated? Think about it. It's kind of ironic. A lot of do's and don'ts in the Torah. That's the person that's called liberated. So, firstly, looking at the Torah as a bunch of do's and don'ts is a bit of an immature outlook. The Torah is a prescription for a healthy soul. If a person wants a healthy soul, the Torah is God's prescription for us. Like a doctor who knows, when we go to a doctor, and the doctor looks us over, he gives us an examination, says, I know what your allergies are, I know how your body reacts, I know what your blood is like, I know how the insides of you work, and based on that, I can give an accurate prescription based on what you need. And so God looks the Jewish person up and down, looks the human being up and down, says, based on your spiritual assessment, based on the way that you appear, this is going to be the most spiritually beneficial instruction manual for you. This is how you're going to be able to maximize your life. So Torah is our prescription for a healthy soul and allows ideal soul expression. Spiritual freedom means soul expression. And following the prescription of the Torah allows for the greatest amount of soul expression. Now, humankind, is ingrained with good ideals. Inherently, in our essence, we are good. We have good deep down. We have good, we have the desire for accomplishment, we have the desire for improvement. At the core of our being is good, is a soul. Ironically enough, one of the places in which we see this, in a very ironic way, in Jewish law, is in the laws of divorce, ironically enough. It's So the innermost desire of a person that is uninfluenced by any outside matters is righteous and good. And how do we see that principle echoed in the laws of divorce? In the laws of divorce, as dictated in the Torah, the initiator in the ceremony of the divorce it has to be initiated by the man. The formal divorce agreement, divorce ceremony, has to be initiated by the man. And it must be willful. He has to want to do it. Okay? Now, if he's a jerk, and for whatever reason, the marriage it needs to end, and out of spite or other reasons, will not give the divorce, he won't initiate it. So the law is that he may be coerced, and even physically. He can be coerced, right? Until he says, okay, I want to, right? Because again, it has to come from him, and it has to be willfully. He has to say, I want to do it. So he can be coerced until he wants it. Then don't try it at home. Don't try this at home. But the law, the idea in theory, is that the person can be coerced to the time where he says, I want to do it. Now, why is that? It doesn't seem to make sense. Right? He has to do it willfully. How can you coerce him until he says, I want to do it? So the apparent compulsion is not considered forcing him. Why not? Because we assume that deep down, he wants to do the right thing. He wants to adhere to the Torah. He wants to do what his soul is telling him to do, but was compelled by his evil inclination to withhold the get, to withhold the divorce document. And so ironically enough, we see this principle that deep down, a person is good and a person is godly, just sometimes the evil impulse, the evil inclination sort of gets in the way. Mankind was made in the image of God. And the deepest desire of the human soul is to express that essence, to express that godly image, that godly spark. And living in accordance with the will of God is the truest and most gratifying expression of the soul and expression of the self. You know, all existence, everything in existence, is an expression of the divine will. And when a person obeys the divine will out of their own volition, we fit ourselves, we get in sync, we get in pattern with creation as a whole. Our objective is to become a vessel, right? Through the prescription of the Torah, become a vessel for doing the godly will. The instructions are laid out. We know clearly what we're supposed to do. We know clearly what we're supposed to avoid. We have to make ourselves more into a vessel for doing those things. A person only, our tradition teaches, a person only does the wrong thing. This is in the Talmud, the Gemara in Saita, says the person only does the wrong thing because a spirit of folly enters into them. Meaning they get distracted, they get confused, they get negligent, whatever it is, and they do something that they really don't inherently deep down want to do, but circumstances, be they as they may, they succumb to it, and the only reason a person does the wrong thing is because a spirit of folly enters them. They think to themselves, this is not going to damage my connection with God. This is not going to impair my pipeline. And meanwhile, meanwhile, it does cloud them, but nevertheless, it's something that they tell themselves that it's not going to affect them. Now, the Talmud tells us, Gemara in Brachos says that Rabbi Alexander prayed, Master of the universe, it is apparent before you that our will is to do your will. We want to do what you want. What prevents us? He says, the leaven in the dough. Our own ego gets in the way. When we talked about Passover 2 weeks ago, right before Pesach, we mentioned that the difference between matzah and chametz is really just time and airiness, right? It's had time to rise, right? We talked about the same inflation that happens with chametz is the same inflation of self that gets in the way of our godly service. And so the Meshech Chochmah in Parshas Vayishlach also writes a similar idea. He says the original intent of creation was that mankind should always be inclined towards good, but the leaven in the dough interferes. So we want to do the right thing. We are, charged to do the right thing, but sometimes the leaven in the dough gets in the way. Okay, so the animal soul, or our natural drives, our impulses, our most base nature, keeps us enslaved to our passions. That's what gets in our way. We have the godly path inside, and then we have our base animal tendencies inside. And those are what gets in the way of that godly nature from showing itself expressly and clearly all the time. Now comes along the period of the Omer. We have 2 verses, essentially, that tell us about the commandment to count the Omer. One is from Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, verses 10 through 11. It says, bring the Omer of your first reaping. That's about bringing the Omer offering. And then we have a few verses later that says, you shall count for yourself from the day of bringing the Omer 7 full weeks. So every day for 7 weeks between Passover and Shavuos, right? It's 49 days in between, and the 50th day is Shavuos, we are to count. So in addition to the sheep that was brought in honor of Passover, that was brought in honor of Pesach, a grain offering was brought the 2nd day of Pesach, the 2nd day of Passover. The Torah commands us on the 2nd day of Passover to bring a measure, an Omer. An Omer is a measurement like a gallon, a liter, of the first cutting of our barley harvest. Okay, we have to bring an Omer's worth of barley, of our barley harvest, to the holy temple as an offering to God, and not to partake of the grain of that year's crop until the offering is made. Okay, we then count 49 days from that offering, and on the 50th day is Shavuos. That's the basics. So the 49-day count leading from Passover to Shavuos is called the counting of the Omer, right? Referencing 49 days, right, from the time that the Omer offering was made, the offering of barley, the offering of grain. So, as usual, things aren't only what they seem on the surface. The fact that God is telling us to bring a barley offering on the 2nd day of Passover has much deeper and practical spiritual implications for all of our lives and at all times. Let's talk about that. First of all, barley is considered primarily animal food. In Torah literature, barley is considered animal fodder, animal food. Wheat is the key ideal human food. Barley is considered animal food. In Hebrew, the word korban, like a sacrifice, means literally to draw near, like karov, kiruv, right? To bring close. So this 49-day period of counting the Omer is an opportune time for spiritual self-development. It represents the opportunity to draw close to God throughout the entire spectrum of human personality, from even the most base instincts and self-preservations. So each one of us has a broad range of emotional characteristics. All of us do. Some are very, base drives that we have, and some are more refined personality qualities that we have. But regarding the emotional aspects, right? Our base animalistic tendencies. Most of us would say that barley offering, animal food, would probably be a fitting offering representing our animal soul, representing our emotional impulses. So the animalistic appetites of physical pleasure, expressions of ego, they must be controlled and tamed by connecting them to the divine. Our job is not to shut off our emotional traits and tendencies. It's to utilize them, to guide them, and use them in a divine fashion. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on the rest of the evening. So we have to offer up our physical drives and desires to control by God, right? Lest they get the better of us. And individuals and societies are filled with people who are plagued by some level of untamed expression of our animal drives. So, the 49 days represent every detail of the person. And they're meant to be 49 gates of purity, 49 gates getting us in what ended up happening. The Jewish people, when they were in Egypt and immersed in Egyptian culture and slavery for so many generations, became spiritually so sunk into impurity that if Moses didn't lead them out at the moment in which he led them out, it says that they would be permanently stuck there. We even say that in the Haggadah, right? If Moses did not take us out, if God, did not take us out, then we and our children and our children's children would still be slaves in Egypt. We'd still be slaves to Pharaoh. Why? How do we know that? How do we even... There would be no future leader that would take them out. There would be there's no other Moses figure, another good guy a few generations later who would save the day. And the meaning is that the people were so immersed, they were so entrenched in the muck, that after that point, they wouldn't even want to leave. Even if a leader came out, even if God revealed, they wouldn't want to leave. You know, sometimes in our own lives, we can find ourselves in similar situations where we're involved in muck. We know we're hanging around the wrong people. We know we're surrounding ourselves with bad influences. Not only people, but places, situations. We know, but we're so immersed. It's so ingrained and embedded in our lifestyle that we don't uproot ourselves. We don't change our circle. We don't change where we're hanging out or who we're hanging out with. We let the negativity sit and it festers in us. So the Jews living in Egypt at the time, during their enslavement, were immersed in not only Egyptian culture, but the Egyptian mentality, limited, constrained, persecuted. But they had become so accustomed to it that if it didn't happen at that time, Egypt mentality would have penetrated their existence forever, and they never would have wanted to escape. The way that Torah literature describes that is that they were sunk in the 49 gates, the 49 levels of impurity. And to sort of rectify that, to sort of bring us out step by step from our muck, God set out between the day that we left Egypt until the Torah was given 49 days as a preparation period in order to be a vessel, a proper conduit to receive the Torah. So one of the things that's mentioned in the Zohar Chadash says that when we count the 49 days of the Omer, from the second night of Passover, it reminds us that each day marks a step away from the defilement of Egypt and a step towards spiritual purity. The Sfas Emes says another interesting idea. He says that the days of counting the Omer are mentioned in the Torah with the other festivals. The same parsha that talks about the other festivals mention the counting of the Omer. And he writes that it's written there because the days in between Passover and Shavuos are like mini festivals. He describes it as an extended Chol HaMoed period. An extended, like, intermediary holiday period. The Sfas Emes. And so one of the things that's described, Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, the mystics write that the root, right, that the same root for Sfirat HaOmer, counting the Omer, that same root can also be used to say the word sapir, right, to shine. So this period of time and counting, and through our counting properly, allows the soul within to shine its brightest. This is the polishing of the soul so that it shines by the giving of the Torah. This is our pathway to perfection. Now again, we are not perfect beings, but we got to be on the path towards that. We got to at least know what direction we're meant to be walking in. So the goal is not to necessarily, by the end of our life, achieve the state of perfection, but as long as we are making conscious effort on a daily basis to go in that direction, we are doing what our life mission is meant to be. So as long as we're putting one foot instead of in front of the other in that capacity, we are doing the right thing. The only way to know which direction is the right direction is, again, through following our prescription. How do we let the soul shine? Follow your prescription. Follow the doctor's orders. He knows us best. He knows what we need. It's interesting, by the way, that in astrology, one of the things that you'll notice, and this class tonight is not in depth on astrology, but one of the things that you'll notice is that in the calendar of the zodiac, the different signs and where they fall in the different times of the year are actually testimony to Jewish events and happenings, energies that are present in the Jewish calendar, right? And when we have a class one day, maybe soon, on astrology, we can go into that in depth. But some of the clearest places that we can see that is the month of, for example, the month of Tishrei, which falls around October. Okay? The astrological sign that is connected with Tishrei is Libra, right? Which is the scales of judgment. And Tishrei, in the Jewish calendar, is the month of judgment, of where your deeds, right, your merits and your flaws, right, are weighed in judgment on the scales of judgment. Each one, if we were to go through the calendar, we would see that each one, where is it actually from? That this was wisdom that was handed down from our earliest sages, including Abraham, and all the way back even to Adam, to Adam. Now, again, I'm not endorsing reading your horoscopes. Don't go to the newspaper, and this is not what we're talking about over here. But certain ideas are embedded and are still seen even in the constellations of the zodiac, that how they correspond with the Jewish calendar. Interestingly enough, getting back to what we're talking about, interestingly enough, the first month in the astrological calendar is Aries, right? The ram, right? Aries falls during the month of Nisan, which is the first Jewish month. Oh, how about that? The reason that the lamb, right, the holiday of the ram, is falling in the time of Nisan is because of the idea of the Korban Pesach, right? The Pesach offering. So the next month, right, which follows Pesach, which follows Aries, is Taurus, right? The month of Iyar, which the whole month of Iyar is when we count the Omer, right? It starts in Nisan, it finishes in Sivan, but the bulk of it is in the Jewish month of Iyar, which is the astrological sign of Taurus, the bull. So Taurus is the sign of the Hebrew month of Iyar, and just like an actual bull, the astrological symbol of the month seeks individuality and isolation. Iyar is therefore a month that is set aside for introspection and self-development through the counting of the Omer in preparation to receiving the Torah. Interestingly enough, the sheep, represented by the month of Nisan, Aries, has no demands made on it by the shepherd. Right? The shepherd just guides the sheep. No demands. Likewise, when the Jewish people were taken out of Egypt, it was through kindness, through unconditional love. It was a period of grace. It was through God's desire to save us. Following the sheep of Nisan comes the bull of Iyar, comes Taurus, where one must cultivate the attributes of strength and restraint. He must be steadfast and stubborn in achieving the goal of refinement before receiving the Torah. He becomes like a bull. We all become like a bull that is cultivated to carry the yoke of its master. This is the difference between Passover, Pesach, which is represented by the lamb, right? It's like a freebie, right? Lamb has no restraints, to the bull, where it's strengthened and cultivated to do work, to plow the field, to do what its master says. The counting as well, the counting of this Omer period between Passover and Shavuos, it also shows our anticipation in receiving the Torah, right? Receiving the Torah is really the whole point of Pesach. Why does God liberate us from Egypt? Why did God take us out? To be his nation, his godly people, who would follow the Torah and bring that Torah, the teachings, to the rest of the world as well. It was for a purpose. There was a purpose in our exodus. It wasn't just let freedom reign, which is a nice concept, but it was a purpose-driven freedom. So counting the days till Shavuos, till receiving the Torah, is like our anticipation, like, when your friend is coming to town or when school's going to let out, right? You count the days, you're excited. The Talmud tells us, the Gemara in Menachos says that each one must count for themselves. You have to count for yourself, meaning the days and the weeks, since both are specified in the verse. So in other words, you want to get the mitzvah properly, what you do is you count the day and the week. So you say, like, for example, it's 8 days, which is 1 week and 1 day, right? You specify both of them. That's ultimately how you get the mitzvah. In our calendar that we print here, you can see what night it is, count at night. If you forgot, you can still count during the day before nightfall. For the in-depth instructions on actually how to count, you can see me after the class.
Yeah, why don't you say the day? Say yesterday was.
Well, after the class. All right. So the primary student of the Arizal, who is known as the greatest Kabbalist, founder of Lurianic Kabbalah, was Rabbi Chaim Vital, and he recorded all of the Arizal's teachings. Rabbi Chaim Vital writes that count for yourself. Why does the verse in the Torah say count for yourselves? Count for yourselves, meaning that it's for your benefit. It could have just said count the days. Why say count for yourselves? because you're counting for your own benefit. Every day that you count, you're uplifting yourself from harsh judgments. You're lifting yourself out from the constraints of the animal soul within, just by the counting. The counting opens up the doorway in your own life to the expression, to the freedom that the soul can have. It must be said verbally. Saying things in words brings about action. The significance, there's a significance to, we say there's a significance to every number, the significance to a number 7, which symbolizes the complete order of things, right? There are 7 days in a week. There are 7 continents in the world. There are 7 colors of the rainbow. There are 7 notes in the music scale, and we have 7 emotional traits inside. Anytime you hear the number 7, think the completion in the natural world. So we have 7 weeks of 7 days. We count 49, right? The 49 days of the Omer. 49 is 7 squared. The unique quality of a squared number means that all the dimensions and expressions are revealed in their entirety. It represents the quintessence of something, right? All that can be quantifiable. So the 49 gates of understanding, the gates of wisdom in which we are able to achieve during the Omer period is the quintessence of our service in actually refining our being, our character traits. Okay? Let's talk about our character traits and how we're meant to have an effect on them during this time. So the scholars of Kabbalah have revealed that the 7 weeks each correspond to one of the 7 Spheros, one of the 7 emotional traits that we have inside. God, the Spheros, right, are God's way, God's mechanism for guiding the world. God guides the world through kindness, through strength, right, through compassion, through leadership, through victory. There are 7 traits in which God doesn't have traits, but there are 7 expressions, 7 ways that God guides the world. God guides the world, and each one of those is represented within our souls as well. Now, just as counting, not just the counting results in some improvement. When we count, we actually improve the universe. Take a step back. Sorry. God connects with and expresses himself to the world in 7 general ways, right? Conveying kindness, conveying strength, etc. And we, our soul, are embedded, and we relate to others, we relate to the world around us in a similar way. So when one counts the Omer, right, when one counts the numbers, not only they are perfecting their soul, they're perfecting a bit of the universe as well. So it's accomplishing what?
Through these traits?
Through these, right. In other words, because we have a connection to the universe that God created, and we were created to express ourselves to the world around us in a similar way, so to speak, that God expresses himself to the universe, that when we count the Omer, we're not only perfecting ourselves, like when we do any mitzvah, we're not only perfecting ourselves, we are uplifting the universe as well. We have a lot of power in our hands. So the main thrust in a person's spiritual labor is to improve himself or herself through the 7 emotional attributes. Now, each of the 7 attributes can be expressed either in a godly way or in a self-centered way. Let's talk about how they can be expressed. Okay? None of them are good or bad. It just depends how they are expressed. So let's take the attribute of chesed, kindness, or love. So kindness, love, is meant to be, right? When it's done in a godly way, it's meant to be expressed outward. It's about you, right? The love and kindness is about giving to you based on what you need, right? It's about you. It's not about me. It's about you. When kindness is not, or love is not directed at you, but it's directed at me, it becomes lust. There's a big difference between love and lust. One is selfless, one is selfish. They can be expressed sometimes in the same action. But what's the motivating factor? Is it about you or is it about me? So chesed, kindness, love, that's done in a selfless way is love. The true meaning of love, the godly meaning of love. Done in a selfish way, same trait, same attribute, is lust. That subtle difference of who's the benefactor, who's the focus, changes it completely. And the same thing with gevura. So the second trait is gevura. Gevura means strength. Strength in Pirkei Avos, in the ethics of our fathers, it asks, who is strong? Who's the strong person? Strong person is someone who has self-restraint, who restrains their impulses. That's a strong person. So gevura is meant to be centered inward, right? Who's strong? Who's a really strong person? Someone who has self-control, has self-restraint. What happens when gevura is expressed outward in a way that it's not meant to? Then it's overpowering people, right? Be strong on yourself. Control yourself. Don't control others. Don't strong-arm people. So when our inner attribute of gevura is directed in the way in which it's supposed to be directed, when it's directed in the godly way, that means I use it for self-restraint, self-control. My strength is in my control of myself, not of you. When it's used in the animalistic way, in the base way, in my egotistical way, I'm trying to control you. I'm trying to strong-arm you. I'm trying to overpower you. Overpower yourself. Overpower your evil inclination. Don't overpower the other person. So again, but the choice is ours. It's the same trait, but you decide how it's going to be expressed. Is it going to be the godly way? Or is it going to be the animalistic way, the selfish way? You're going to be selfless or selfish? I don't want to go through in depth the others. We'll just kind of casually go through them. Okay. The next trait is Spheros, which literally means beauty, but it also is attributed to mercy, the idea of mercy. The good way in which mercy is used is when we bestow mercy upon someone who is deserving of mercy. But having mercy on someone who is undeserving, right? By default, what you're doing is if you have mercy on someone who doesn't deserve mercy, like a terrorist, a convicted terrorist, right? If you have mercy on them, by default, you're automatically not having mercy on the victims. So mercy, it seems like a trait that's only good, right? But mercy, even mercy, has a direction in which it is godly and good, and which can be used destructively as well. The next trait within us is the quality of netzach, of victory. So victory, that's a good one, right? So there's a certain victory, accomplishment that comes about when our inner talents come out through competition, right? Nothing brings out a person's good qualities right? They're hidden talents, they're innate talents that when they're subject to a competition, right? That's a good quality of victory. You really put in your all because, you're trying to be your best. You're trying to run the fastest. You're trying to work. That is a good expression. But if victory is directed just towards your own self-aggrandizement, then it's about quashing the other. It's about winning at all costs. It's not about you developing yourself in a better way, right? Being victorious over those things that hold you back. It's about the winning. Doesn't matter how. I'll cheat. Whatever. I will conquer over you so that I can win. It's about me winning. So that's how netzach, victory, can be used in a good way, a selfless way, and the selfish way, and not in a way that is not good. Then there's the attribute of hod, humility, which is, in a good way. In a good way, that means limiting a person's sense of self. Limiting a sense of self. The bad way is limiting of one's sense of value. Right? One is limiting your sense of self. That you're good, but there's others who you still have what to do. You still have where to go. You're doing great, and you're a wonderful person, but there's still room for improvement, right? So there's a big difference between limiting one's sense of self and limiting one's sense of value. And this is the way that attribute, right, the midah that we have, the trait that we have, potential of hods, of humility, expresses itself. Then you have yisoid, which means to bind together, similar to communication. Communication can be used for very good things and to build things, and communication can also be used to start very bad things as well. Again, the choice is ours. How are we going to use that sort of neutral trait that we have? And then malchus, leadership, kingship. Again, this is something that can also be used for great purposes or for destructive purposes. So these dispositions, these traits, these 7 traits, don't exist in a vacuum. Meaning that never do any of these traits exist in just a pure form. Every practical expression of these is a combination of the 2 or 3 or 5 or it's all a combination. Here's what we mean. A lot of us think of kindness, right, as just pure kindness. But sometimes doing the kind thing, in order to do what is kind, must be expressed through strictness. For example, if you see a child playing with matches, what is the kind thing to do? To grab the matches away from them. Maybe even scold the child. You can't play with matches. Yell at them, whatever. Give them a little, flick on the hand. Can you still say that these days? I don't know. Okay, forget I said that. Right. Not too hard. A little one. Right? So again, the child, the action that you are doing is inherently a kind act. But the expression of that kind act is through strictness. You had to show your strength. You had to put them in their place. And so, but the act, if you were to just say, oh, it's okay, I don't want to be mean or anything, right? Just you play with the matches or whatever. Because I'm kind, right? I just want to be kind. I want to do kindness. What you're doing is in fact not kindness. So in practice, each thing that we do has to be a balance, perfecting each trait. In other words, each of the general traits contain within it an aspect of the other 6. Right? So chesed has chesed of chesed, where you're doing kindness, and that's expressed in kindness. Then you have chesed of gevura. Gevura of chesed, right? It's kindness that you're doing, but the kindness is being done through strength, through strictness. And then even that strictness has to be done with balance, because you can, everything, again, it has to be in balance. You can't grab it away from the kid and ground them for life, right? That would be that would be strength, that would be too much strength. So it has to be tempered by the other traits as well. So every practical expression of any emotional or character interaction that we have is a combination, an amalgamation of the 7 traits that we have, each detail of each trait. So what ends up happening, we have 7 days in a week and 7 weeks in the Omer period. So each week is one trait, and each day of the week we're meant to be perfecting one aspect of one trait. And in the Siddur, in the prayer book, it actually goes through what that day's focus is. What trait that is. What is our focus meant to be for that day? So let's talk about, just give a brief overview of how it's done in the Siddur, and then and some of the meaning behind it, and then we will end off on a note for actual transformation. Sound like fun? So the first thing that we do in order to get the mitzvah properly, right? And I would recommend just anyone the whole procedure for counting of the Omer is in a Siddur, which can be even downloaded online. It's easy to get. If you need it, you can ask me. I can send it to you, whatever it is. So the first thing to get the mitzvah is to say it audibly, right? To actually say the words, the days and the weeks, right? And do it while standing. Do it while standing. And the first time of counting the new day begins at nightfall, right? So to count whatever that day is, the responsibility begins at nightfall. Now, the next thing that we do in the prayer book is we ask that the temple be rebuilt. This is one line. It asks God to please rebuild the temple. And the reason is that we are lacking in the offering. We can't offer the Omer offering today. So there's a certain bit of our service that is lacking, right? So the first thing that we do after we count the Omer is we ask God, please restore the temple so that we can have the full effect of what the Omer counting is meant to do. The next thing that we say is Psalm 67. That's the next thing that's prescribed in the Siddur. Now, interestingly enough, Psalm 67, how many words do you think there are in Psalm 67? 49 words. Okay, one for each day. One word corresponds to each day. And so there is a tradition that psalm was revealed to Moses and King David in the form of a menorah. The Akedah Yitzchak, a Torah commentary, says that psalm, when it was revealed to them, was shown in the shape of a menorah. In fact, in some Siddurim, in some prayer books, the graphic, right, breaking it up into the shape of a menorah, some of the, especially Sephardic, the prayer book that Sephardim use, oftentimes has this psalm actually written out in the shape of the menorah. And so it says, there's a verse in Koheles, in the book of Ecclesiastes. It says that the heart of the wise man is turned towards the right. The heart of the fool is turned towards the left. And the verses of the psalm are written on the branches of the menorah. This is how the psalm is written in that graphic. So three branches on one side, on the right side, 3 branches on the left side. Half of them are God-centered, right? And half of the verses are talking about matters of the world. And so the configuration alludes to us that the whole Sphera process, the whole counting process, is that godly matters dominate all of our material matters. That the godly side dominate the material side. That our godly soul, our godly aspects in our life dominate the animalistic tendencies in our life. That's why we read that particular psalm. The next thing that it discusses in the prayer book is after Psalm 67. We read the Ana B'Koach prayer, which is a deeply mystical prayer. It represents the movement from one state to another, right? It has seven. It's made up of 7 verses, seven lines corresponding to the 7 days of the week, and the initials of each word in each line form godly names, Kabbalistically form divine names. So the mystical and lofty prayer is attributed to the first century Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, and it says about this prayer that it consists of 7 passages, and each passage corresponds to the 7 emotional spheros through which divine energy sustains and nourishes the universe. The Ana B'Koach prayer is also known, right? Each of the words in each line form a divine name, and if you go through all of the letters, all of the acronyms, it forms the 42 name of God, the 42-letter name of God. One of the things that it says is that the ultimate movement from slavery to freedom is accomplished with the 42-letter name of God. And that's one of the reasons why the Jewish people on their moving from Egypt, right, of slavery to the promised land of Israel, of the land of Israel, stopped in 42 journeys. And the Baal Shem Tov writes that that is in essence talking about the 42 journeys of our own lives that everybody has, the 42 different chapters in all of our lives, right? The pathways to freedom of achieving everything that it is that we're meant to achieve within our life. So again, each of the 7 lines, you put it all together, you get 49 words when you count the divine names that are made, each word for a day of the Omer. So again, throughout this process, we have sort of this mystical tradition that through reciting these psalms and these prayers with the counting enhances our ability, enhances our zealousness in carrying out the mission of perfecting our character traits, utilizing our selfless nature, right, as opposed to our selfish nature. Let's end on this note. Question is, why not count down? Why not count down? I mean, seemingly that makes more sense. Usually when you're excited for something, remember, we're part of the reason that we're counting it is that we're trying to count the days from Passover to Shavuos, right? We count upward. We start with 1 and go to 2. Usually when you're looking forward to something, you count down. When kids right now are already counting down, right, how much school is left. When you have vacation in 2 weeks, right, you say, I'm counting down the days. You don't say, I'm counting up the days. So if you're really excited, if we were really excited about this, why are we counting up? So, partially, yeah. Here's the deal. When we count down to something, we wish that the space in between would go away. In other words, when kids are counting down to the end of school, they wish that 2 weeks in between would just go away. They could already be at the end of school. When it's vacation, you're counting down to vacation. What you mean is that I wish those 2 weeks would just disappear and I was on vacation right now. When we count Spheros HaOmer, when we count the Omer, each day is a treasure. We're counting towards something. We're counting towards Shavuos. We're going in a direction, but each day has inherent value. It's kind of like the difference between, let's say somebody says they're going to give you $1 million at the end of 100 days, or they tell you they're going to give you $10,000 for the next 100 days, and that eventually you're going to get to $1 million, right? With the $10,000 per day, by the way, anyone who wants to make me this offer, I am happy to accept. The one who, if you do it, if you think about it in the way of the $10,000 a day, every day is exciting, right? Every day is enjoy. So every day of the counting of the Omer period is inherently important. We're not wishing that these days would just go away and we at Shavuos already. No, each day is treasured. Each day is growth. Each day is good in its own right. Also, like Eti said, the reason that we count upward is because life is meant to be a ladder upward. We have to make sure that we're just putting the next foot on the next rung of the ladder. Doesn't matter necessarily what rung we are on, as long as the movement of our feet is climbing upward. We're always climbing upward. The question that each of us have to ask during this Spheros HaOmer period, and we will end on this note. Passover is a free gift. Leaving Egypt is a free gift. God just took us out. We were taken out of Egypt, but was the Egypt mentality taken out of us? So we got freed, we had a free gift, but will we revert back? And like anything else in life, if you don't use it, you lose it. If you're going to the gym, I don't know anything about that, but if you are going to the gym, okay, I'm sure many of you are surprised when you look at my physique, you are, wow, that is one ripped rabbi, right? But if you stop going to the gym, I've heard, right, your muscles, they start turning to flab because they don't just stay there. If you don't use it, you lose it. And the same works when we're developing our spiritual muscles as well. When we are working towards something, when we are activating ourselves, when we are engaged in spirituality, this is the only way to grow. This is the only way to ascend. We were taken out of Egypt, we were freed, but if we don't work, there's a good chance that we'll revert right back to our own inner Egypts. The choice is ours. Let's utilize the period through just counting and introspection about how we can make the impact of Pesach, the freedom of Pesach, something that's real in our life, something that penetrates not only till Shavuos, but the entire year as well. In Hebrew, the word teva means both ark and word. And by you and I delving into the words of Torah, we too are saved and protected from the tumultuous and catastrophic events that happen throughout our lives. The ARC online learning program is your opportunity, no matter what your religious background is, to delve into Torah in a thorough and clear way with a rabbi. Now, you don't have a lot of time. You're dealing with work, you're dealing with the kids, you're dealing with all sorts of stuff. That's why we've condensed every day's lesson into 15 minutes. Plus, you'll have access to all the back archives and access to the rabbi. So anytime you can learn at your own pace and whatever time you choose. I hope that you'll sign up for the ARC today. If you have any questions about it, just comment below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing all of you on board the ARC today.